I want to welcome to the show Keith Newman. Keith Newman has over 40 years' experience writing for the mainstream and trade media. He began his research into the life of T.W Ratana in 1986. Two decades later, his first book, Ratana Revisited, was published. And Keith joins us right now from the beautiful Homoana in Hawke's Bay. Keith, good afternoon as we record this. Good evening as we play this.
Hey, Pat. Good to see you.
Yeah, very long time, and it's lovely to see you floating around the world and the Twitter sphere and the social medias and with the work that you're still doing. So it's always good to catch up, even though it's fairly sporadic, shall we say. Keith, you have written the book, which is right there in front of the people if they want to see it, Ratana the Prophet. And I thought you would be a good person to speak to about Ratana in general, because most of us think of it as an event or a place that Māori go to at about this time of year. But of course, Ratana was a person, and you spent 20 years researching the person, and I thought maybe you could give us a bit of a bit of an idea of who the man was that I guess continues to be celebrated every year at Ratana by the people.
Ratana is a really important person in New Zealand's history. I think without his efforts in 1924, we wouldn't have had the treaty. He was determined, along with Kingitanga, to restore the treaty to prominence after it had been ignored for such a long time. But really, between the two world wars, starting in 1918, Māori were in a fairly broken place. A lot of their men went overseas to fight the war, and when they came back, Pākehā soldiers found that they'd been granted some land, and Māori often found out that the land that they thought they had was no longer there. And Ratana had a vision, 1918, 2 whales beached at Whangaihu. Something extraordinary was going on. He was the local bookie. He was a good drinker, and he used to like to hang out with the locals, but something was happening to him. His auntie Mere Rikiriki, who was a prophetess who was well known to Kingitanga and to Whiti and Tohu, had told him, there's something about your children, there's something on you that you need to pursue. So Ratana's doing Bible studies. He's trying to hang on to this kind of vision, but he's not quite getting it. But these events happen that force him to realize that there's something going on here. He's well aware that Māori are in a precarious position, and in 1918, 8th of November, something's happening. There's this cloud comes towards him from the from Whangaihu to the family house, and he's overpowered. There's like fire inside of it, and he hears this voice calling him to unify the Māori people under Ihoa o Namano, or Jehovah of the multitudes, to heal the people from their sicknesses and to turn them away from their fear and superstition, particularly amongst the tohunga and the old gods. So something's going on. And when people start, and there are a couple of healings, particularly his own son, and word gets around and people want to know what's happening, and they start to come to Ratana Pā to meet this healer. And really the vision happened at a time just before the end of the First World War. So it was a very strategic timing. And he's saying to the soldiers that are coming back who are feeling lost, they've got all these new skills. He's saying, come to the Pā, we can do something here with you. We're building something. And that's one of the things that Ratana did, was that he didn't just talk, he gave people a model for the future. He built farms, he created work for people, he restored their confidence. But it was the healing that was the biggest influence, and it got people saying, hang on, there's something going on here that we want to be part of. And people began to turn up at the Pā. Many people got healed from physical sicknesses. Their frustrations were aired. Ratana took a lot of tapu items away, and urge them to step away from their superstitions and fears toward Ihoa or Numano or Jehovah of the multitudes. And that gave rise really over a period of time to the largest Māori religious movement in this country. And it sort of got quiet after his death in 1939. There are extraordinary stories of what he did during his life: healing, removing tapu, restoring confidence to people, working with kingitanga, working with ringatu, working with Māori people all around the country as he got their treaty stories, took them to London, sought for the British government and the Crown to be able to recognise the treaty. Got told that by his own government that wasn't representative of New Zealand Māori, to take it back home. Really frustrating. And eventually there's a petition goes to the New Zealand government by Erawera Tirakapani in 1932, tabling the 40,000 signatures of Māori throughout the country, asking for the treaty to be recognised and to be placed in law. And that was tabled when he was elected as the first Ratana independent, but it took 14 years to be heard. Hey, well, this is history repeating, and what we're seeing at the moment through the gathering at Narua Wahia, through Māori saying, hang on a minute, don't mess with the treaty, through what's happening at Ratana Pa, and I imagine it'll be quite an ambassadorial gathering at the Pa this weekend. This is not a place of contention, but it's time for a discussion about our national identity. Waitangi may go a bit more aggressive, but there's a conversation going on. It's a long overdue conversation. Māori are trying to have a kotahitanga conversation for a long time, talking about governance, talking about equal rights, talking about how they get a seat at the table or become part of the decisions that are made at the table. And I think this is a turning point in history. And Ratana certainly is a wonderful place where Māori go, where the politicians go to lay out their policy for the year ahead. What better time to lay it on the table, what's going to be planned? I don't think this legislation about the treaty will get through. I don't think National will support it past the first reading. A fascinating time for Aotearoa to be having this conversation. And to me, Māori have been very gracious in the way that they've handled this, but for how much longer that will happen, I don't know. Ratana was always a peacemaker. He was always saying, are you united yet? And he was saying, really, you need to have a spiritual heart at what you're doing. Under Ihoa o Numano, or Jehovah of the multitudes, the Māori are a spiritual people, and the Treaty of Waitangi would not have been signed if it hadn't been for the missionaries and if Māori hadn't understood it as a spiritual covenant or kawanata. So really there's an undergirding principle there that needs to be raised, and I think Ratana can do that, Kingitanga can do that. They both have Christian backgrounds and basis, and they've all been asking for the same thing: unity, ko tahitanga. How can we do this together? Or as they said at the signing of the treaty, hey, iwi tahi tato, not the Don Brash version, but the version that says we two peoples together make a great nation. So how are we going to do this? I think it's time to listen. It's time to listen to what Māori are saying, and for the government to hear this is an opportunity now to turn around and go, okay, we now need to have a serious conversation about who we are as a people and what it's going to look like going forward. What a great opportunity. Let's turn adversarial situation into an opportunity, and I'm sure that a lot of people at Ratana will be hoping that that's what happens, that it becomes a peaceful resolution, but there's some hard issues. We've got to lift up a few stones and ask some hard questions and find out who we are going forward for all of our benefit.
Keith, that was amazing. We'll leave it there because the technical difficulties have got to us today, but just what you shared about Ratana is going to be amazing. Most people haven't heard that before. I mean, I've read your book and it still reminds me of it a few times, of what we need to know about a man who was sort of the genesis of the movement that's being celebrated this week right there. So we thank you for your time. And if anyone wants to get Ratana the Prophet, they can find it in libraries and stuff still? Is it around?
Still find it in the libraries. The new version of Ratana the Prophet being printed by Oratia Books in May this year.
So it's going to get printed in May. So if people are interested more in the new version, Ratana the Prophet, as we lose Keith one more time, sounds like it'll be available again, a reprint in a couple of months' time.